were deemed, African nations were supposed to have been evolving into a more democratic stature. And in Southern Africa, if you take out countries like South Africa, Mugabe's Zimbabwe then was also seen as headed in that direction. It was not enough to have elections and not have what is called credible elections. That's what many complained about. Indeed, when they tried credible elections, even Mugabe's continual stay in office was threatened.
The problem
he was winning.
What are you calling a credible election?
No, the credible election is one that provides a fair playing ground where intimidation is not at its height, where the opposition are not clearly. And to be clear, the definition of same is also stipulated clearly in the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and also the Charter stipulates specifically in Article 18 that state parties shall ensure that they conduct credible elections. State parties shall establish and strengthen an independent and impartial national electoral body which shall represent the management of elections and establish and strengthen national mechanism for redress of election-related disputes. As at the time that particular 2009 issue was brought up, there was none of its existing institutions. Indeed, many knew that the Electoral Commission then was under the thumb of the president, an institution that was supposed to be independent. They also knew that it was close to impossible to get the Supreme Court of Zimbabwe to do any proper review of the electoral systems in that particular country. So they've come from far. For 37 good years, the strong man of what they call Zimbabwe was Mugabe. There were excesses, and that has happened in other countries too. But Mugabe's strength was known on the continent. And also, Mugabe dictated, and we were particularly connected to Mugabe because Ghana, Mugabe's first wife was from here. Mugabe trained here in the Nkrumah Ideological Institute. You also went to Achimota School, as many have stated in times past. So we had links with him. We've been called upon several times to intervene in the Zimbabwean crisis one way or the other. State leaders in Ghana have sought to do so through other means, even though this is Southern Africa, and we're talking about West Africa in this case. So the reputation of the continent was consistently, at least according to those who did the assessment, being dented by Mugabe's record and that of the Southern Africa and also Zimbabwe. We were worried that it reached a point the economy of that country was beginning to be a bigger threat. And now we are part of the AU. AU tried so many times to intervene, but the AU did not even have the muscle, first and foremost, in the security architecture to deal with the problem. Secondly, it didn't have the financial muscle to also make any turnaround. Because at the time I wanted to make an intervention, AU was predominantly funded by the EU.
Yeah.
The EU were also the people who were pushing,
predominantly funded by the EU.
Pushing sanctions in a way that was making it impossible for Zimbabwe to strengthen itself. So we had the backlash for being laid back, for being incompetent in managing our own problem, as Nkrumah stipulated some time ago, because we were unsure what we needed to do.
But
join
again,
colonial masters or fight for the Zimbabwean people in a way that made sense.
No, then again, Raymond, what would constitute fighting for the Zimbabwean people? Because when you're looking at the Mugabe issue, there is a bone of contention there. Some would say he won elections. Some would say he's someone who was supported by his people. Some would say he's someone who stood up against our former colonial masters.
Yes, but those were the early years of Mugabe. It reached a point, and sometimes we single out common Mugabe, but the ZANU-PF itself lost its track long time ago. And Mugabe was virtually running like a sole agent, unable to govern properly, but the poster child for all the bad things that should happen when you have a dictator in place. And there's electoral dictatorship. It happens all the time. Because if you determine democracy, if you determine rule of law with only successful elections, whether be coerced or not so credible elections, you have what Mugabe was running in the state. There was widespread disapproval. And let me tell you why this was important. The structure that the ZANU-PF ran made it impossible for change to happen because they virtually coerced all state agencies to kowtow to them. Mm-hmm. That you could have had an independent police coming to address your problems. You could have had an independent judiciary addressing your problems. And again, you could have had an independent electoral commission. All of these were in clear violations of the stipulations which Mugabe's Zimbabwe signed in the African Charter. So it was clear that that state was treated specially because of its history. It was also difficult for the people to dissociate themselves from Zimbabwe's ZANU-PF and Mugabe. the party itself they believe in, the man they also believed in. They lost belief in the party, but still wanted to keep Mugabe as their leader because of the history. So that's why the change of Mugabe affected the system.
There is a clear indication that the people still supported the man as a character.
Yes, to be fair, he had wide support.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
and that is the point. That
is why
goes
he
against
could
the
lose
point
a
of
parliamentary
credibility of the
election.
election. That's the credibility of the elections he won.
No, but
and
it is different. You
the
can have
will of the
people
people
supporting
now.
you, but if you're press opposition, if opposition is compelled to, you know that in 2000, the election before the 2009 election, they had to withdraw. The opposition had to withdraw because, imagine in Ghana, the MPP withdraws for the election because there's massive violation of the rights of the members of the MPP. You hope you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
That an opposition party is withdrawing because, and it was clear, the evidence was there. They were being beaten up, they were being rushed into areas, they were being arrested for staging lawful rallies, which were clearly in the body's constitution and all of that. And we should admit that some level of Mugabe's rule was clearly dictatorial, regardless of the election that took place. Moving forward, all of this was supposed to happen with a change. But many have even argued that the replacement of Mugabe was not any better person. He was going to get Western support, which was true, but he did not believe in the ideals of having an independent Zimbabwe the way Mugabe did. Even though he fought as a military man with him, even though he led the military in so many times, he was more the rent-seeking person in this particular case.
And you can hear from some of his public pronouncements since then that he seems to be more kind to the cause of the West. Zimbabwe is ready for business.
Possibly eroding what took many years, toils, so many lives to actually put in place in that country, even though it didn't work perfectly. Now, what's going to happen? You saw two groups. First, the young, the educated, those who are come back to work in places in Zimbabwe were the ones who are opposing the ZANU-PF's representative in this case. The young candidate, who is a lawyer, who is the pastor, was not the ideal person they wanted. But he seemed to be the better compromise and represented the ideals of the future of Zimbabwe more than the established structure, especially when this is a deceptive established structure that the current president was running. That's why even Mugabe was bold enough to have said that if you remove the story, I'll support you. In this case.
Yeah.
And when I heard the number of 6 people die in this case, it is, and this is not being insensitive, it's perhaps one of the lowest numbers that Zimbabwe has had been dead in an election. Yes. They've had up to almost 200 in times past.
Wow.
They've had very serious atrocities in times past. It's because their electoral system is still reforming to accept a possibility that somebody else, apart from the ZANU-PF, could lead the country.
So, Raymond, wrapping up.
Yeah. I believe that, for example, the structures in Zimbabwe ought to be built properly, and in other African countries too. We have to de-emphasize the single role of individuals who become 10 gods and demigods along the line. The system should work in a way that Mugabe can be a form of the good part South Africa represented, not entirely South Africa. The good part represented when it comes to rule of law, when it comes to being mindful of opposition rights, when it comes to building a state, not just because a few have to benefit from it.
You know, this issue of a strong man, I know these are your final comments, but a certain tall man from Rwanda seems to defy the theory of a strong man not being Paul Kagame is doing fabulously well. He's a poster boy for governance, for good governance in Ghana, but not for in Africa, but not for democratic elections.
Yes, I agree that the one size doesn't fit all, and that democratic conversations ought to be had. I do recall that the Africa Center for Economic Transformation's boss, K.Y. Mwako, did this particular wonderful presentation some years ago, just opposing Ghana so many years of democratic experimentation and the fruits it was supposed to yield. Democracy in and of itself is nothing if it's not yielding the needed fruits, the needed fruits of having to progress, having development and all of that.
Some say that it's not even well suited for Africa.
No, I disagree.
You disagree?
I have always argued that there are structures in Africa that was democratic prior to the coming into...
No, it was a form of democracy. No, it was a form. I know there's a village called Asemensiru in Sekendi. Well, it's not a village; it's a suburb of Sekendi. But it's a rural community where they vote for their chief.
Yes,
Asemensiru they do.
I'm saying that we have structures that depicted democracy. We are not opposed in and of itself to democracy. It is the thinking of some that believe that the two cannot work together. Ghana's last republic have shown that can make modest gains, even with democratic credentials
But compare
improving.
the gains of Rwanda under Kagame versus the gains of Ghana under from Rawlings to Kufuor
I
to
get you.
Mills to Mahama. I mean, so I mean that's the,
But-
I mean, look.
but
So
if you
on
ignore
one
the-
hand you have Robert Mugabe, on one hand you have Paul
Okay, so
Kagame.
eliminate Kagame.
Yeah.
If you eliminate Kagame, give me another example.
But the question is that no, really, the question, the
There
reason
is
why
none.
no, listen. The reason why we can't really give another example.
Because all the other
Let
shining
me
examples
finish.
are democratic institutions.
Let me finish.
Yes.
Eliminate Rwanda. Give me another example of economic growth
Yes.
within the same period, like Rwanda.
Okay, so when you say economic growth,
Yes.
yeah, let's look
Holistic.
at
Let me even
development
make it
in general.
holistic
Yes,
growth.
yes, because
Holistic
economic growth.
growth.
I mean, Ghana's economic growth have been very phenomenal over the
Yes.
period.
Yes. So let me make a holistic growth.
Yes, holistic growth, and I agree with you perfectly. For a structure like that to work, and let's not, I mean, for example, a country like, what's the name of that country? Is it Mauritius?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is
No, forget Mauritius, Botswana.
Yeah.
Botswana is not running a Kigali structure. But Botswana
it's
is
not.
actually running a democratic one that's showing real evidence of growth on the ground.
Hmm.
And the two are not impossible to do together. I'm just saying that we cannot eliminate and use the big boy as the only example of a shiny African state that's doing well. There are others that are doing well. The pace might be slower, and those are democratic radical engagements. And you see, participation, having to get people on the same page so that they can come with you, not through coercion, is a more sustained way of developing a state. And it's been shown over the period. Unfortunately, I agree too that we need to suit our own democracy in a way that makes sense to our people and not the one that we imbibe from other states. We can't have Trojan horse democracies partying around and making it look like we are doing something good in those areas. And that's what other states ought to learn from. My final point is to do with the role of international bodies like the AU and other sub-regional bodies. I think, again, the early signals they sent in this case were very poor. They didn't show any real interest in intervention. They didn't show any real interest in reaching compromise on both sides when it came to the Zimbabwean situation. And that's where my problem is. Mindful of the history of that country, it would have been more important. And I mean, I will not fault the EU or any external institution for not doing the same. But if you wish to run this continent the way it ought to be run, if the AU want to be as relevant as the EU, it should be relevant to the ordinary people in Mugabe's land who will go to the market, who will actually try to find a way around, who are not the politicians in this case.
Yeah.
This continental unity, that's only for the presidents, only for ministers in society, has proven that it will not work.
But we have.
It didn't work when we were OAU.
Listen.
It didn't work.
Raymond, listen.
Yes.
Take your time. At the moment, there's a roadmap that we are supposed to be working towards. Currently, traditionally and on ethnic lines, we are already united to an extent.
We said it in 1963.
No, I'm talking about on ethnic lines.
Yes.
Yes, me, I have family members in Cote d'Ivoire.
Yes, and we knew that
so
1963.
Yes. So we are to an extent. However, the model of governance that we run already is polarized because there are different colonial masters, there are different cultural, traditional, should I say, governance structures that run. There are different ideas. Look at Ghana versus Cote d'Ivoire over the oil.
Yeah, but it was resolved amicably. It was actually fruitful arbitration. It was not even very contentious. So,
Okay.
yes, I mean, that's a perfect example of how we could have done things better. But clearly, it was better than how Nigeria and Cameroon fought over the Bakassi land.
Oh, yeah, you have
Yes.
a point there.
So,
It's definitely better than how Gaddafi invaded Chad.
very good. So,
Anyway.
I mean, it's a continent that ought to realize that if we fix our problems and we have all the resources here, it's been repeated consistent that River Congo can give all of us electricity and we don't rely on the Akosombo.
You know what I think? I think that
But we are not using the resources the way it ought to be done.
I think that we are not sitting to have conversations about what the African can do beyond what the Ghanaian or the Nigerian or the Congolese or what the Rwandan can do. We've had, for instance, we've sat here and talked a lot about how we can learn from other African economies. But have we really talked enough about... The other day, we were talking to Franklin Kujo, and he made a very, very pointed example of how Rwanda has been able to attract a factory from Volkswagen.
Yeah.
You know VW
They
already
didn't
has a
take much.
factory in Kenya, but you know they already have a factory
Yes.
in Kenya. And China, for instance, funny enough, their labor is becoming too expensive. So a lot of these Chinese businessmen who set up factories in China are relocating to
Seeking
Africa.
alternatives.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I haven't seen that clear path of collaboration beyond maybe something like common external tariff, which in its implementations, we know what it has become.
So when it comes to tax, that's we are good at taking tax.
Yeah.
But when it
For
comes
the
to
money
getting the
we'll
ordinary
take.
person to go through, and I've made this example from Ghana here. If you want to go by road to Nigeria, the Benin border, the Seme border,
Okay.
all of those things, the extortion that will happen on those routes, you regret having to use these ones. And these are very close countries.
It's a problem.
With just small differences.
It's a problem.
But we are not fixing those problems because the presidents, they go by air. They don't feel the problem. Yes.
Interesting Thursday, Raymond. It's 18 minutes past 8 on the Super Morning Show. Would like you to let you have a bite of this, so we'll open the phone lines and we'll take your text messages and your WhatsApp messages after these important messages. But stay with us on the Super Morning Show, because coming up later,
there are so many issues, in Ghana here especially.